We're going to go ahead and get started with the afternoon speakers. The first one up is David Langford. And David, for the past 25 years, has trained colleagues in public and private K through 12 school systems, university, colleges, preschools, chambers of commerce, business divisions ranging from Boeing and General Motors, who we've talked about quite a bit, to government agencies such as the Department of Defense. He's worked with organizations throughout the United States, as well as Canada, Europe, Asia, the Middle East, and South America. In Australia alone, over 5,000 educators in 1,000 schools have been successfully impacted by this training. David's has facilitated his trademark 4-day quality learning seminar hundreds and hundreds of times, and over 30,000 U.S. educators have gone through it, with additional participants from government and business. David was featured in the PBS film Quality or Else and has appeared in numerous other documentaries, including the Deming Library. He's the author of Tool Time for Education, Tool Time for Business, Healthcare, and co-author of Tool Time for Lean and Orchestrating Learning with Quality. He's developed a number of quality resources and material, including the creation of the new Quality Improvement Guide. David's also on the Deming Institute, long time been on the Deming Institute Advisory Board, and advises and works with us and with me personally very closely on developing education programs for the future and learning opportunities. And I've been to a number of his 4-day seminars, and they're absolutely fantastic if you ever have an opportunity to get to one. So with no further ado, let me bring David up to the stage, and welcome to the beginning of the afternoon.
Great. So, good afternoon. Yeah, so how many of you have been in a training with me before? So it's never going to work, is it? So we can't start a quality, session with a quality response like that. So we learned this morning, with the Nerf ball, there were characteristics at work. So what's a characteristic of a high quality response? Loud. Loud. Okay, so we had some volume with that. Yes. Enthusiasm. Genuine. What's what we're making here? So we're trying to figure out what is that? How are we going to know if we're doing a better job? So quick, yeah. We don't spread your good afternoons out for the next hour. Just one shot in unison. Full participation. All right. So we got full participation with enthusiasm, quick, high volume. I get them all. So knowing those characteristics, one more time. Good afternoon. Good afternoon. See? Just goes to show you people can always improve when they understand the measures by which they're being judged. So, thought about many ways, things that I could go over with you and talk about during this session. I'm used to doing 4-day conferences, so doing an hour is that I can hardly even just take a breath and it's all over again. So, and it's a good thing I really didn't plan a PowerPoint presentation or something, because after listening to the 4 sessions this morning, it would have been all, I would just have said ditto. So over lunch, I took some different aspects and started to think about different things that I could share with you and work through things. And for the students who are here, one of the things I think is most powerful is to think about, this Deming approach or way of thinking is all around us all the time. It's either there or it's woefully missing. And there's really interesting things that happen all the time. I travel a lot and get a lot of rental cars and stuff, and maybe you've encountered this. You get 2 sets of key fobs on here. And so, one time I got those and I thought, I'm often locking myself out of my car at home. I'll keep one of these in my briefcase, Can't get it off there. So one time I asked the rental car agents, I said, why do we have 2 sets of keys? And they said, well, in case you lock one in your car. Something's missing here. So And now the thing is so big, you know, you can hardly even get it in your pocket, or if you're a woman, you put it in your purse and it takes up the whole purse. And so, you know, is the customer really in mind when we think about those things? So I met Dr. Deming in 1986 along with Dr. Michael Twitty. We both had more hair then. And I was a very young man myself. I was only about 12 at the time. So. But mostly I was in fear of Deming. When I first got invited to go, I'd read Out of the Crisis or read about it or something, and so I called up his office. You know, I didn't know who he was. You know, hey, can I have dinner with you or something? And I got his secretary seal, and she said, well, I'll talk to Dr. Deming. And he said, you're in education? I said, yes, I'm a teacher. And he said, well, you can come to any of my seminars you want to as my guest for free. And at the time, they were going for about $1,100 a pop. So I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. That's a third of my entire salary, you know, to go to that thing. And the first time I went, I thought, you know, what does this, you know, old man have to offer educators? You know, I heard he's in manufacturing and, you know, helping business, you know, and what does that have to do with education? And like Paula this morning, you know, one of the first things is, he said at the 4-day conference, are there any educators here at the conference I was at? And, you know, I kind of put my hand up and looked around the room, and I was the only one. There wasn't anybody else in that group. And so he took his personal time to humiliate me over the rest of his life. And that's pretty much what happened, the transformation of thinking about everything I did and, you know, what would life be like in a different world, and begin to think about things. So I went back to my school, my classroom, and started to take on Deming's challenge. And going through his training, I realized right away that it wasn't about manufacturing. It wasn't about business. It was about learning. In fact, that was probably one of his greatest loves, was education, learning. He was a teacher himself at New York University. He wanted to see the education system change drastically. And I guess I was the guinea pig for that, so I worked hard trying to figure this stuff out. How does it work in a classroom? What do you do about things, et cetera? So I'm going to put you to work to help me with this presentation here. And so what I want you to do is to think about, even if you're just totally new to this and you've only been through this morning session, that's all you know about Deming, et cetera, I think you've learned quite a few things about what he was about and what it would look like. So what I want you to do is I want you to stand up. And I just want you to kind of turn around and form groups of 3 or 4 people, so you're kind of facing them. And I want you to think for just a couple of minutes. You're going to need a scribe, have somebody that's going to be a scribe in your group. But I just want you to discuss and to talk for just a couple of minutes. If we were going to have a Deming school, say we're going to create a Deming school system, whether that's K through 12 or a university, however you want to think about it. But we're going to create a Deming school system. So what's going to be in our Deming school system? So somebody needs to be a scribe. As people come up with stuff, just kind of jot things down. What's it going to be doing? What are we going to be doing? Go. I don't know. Yeah. Okay, so wrap up that last thought. Okay, so let's, I'll have you sit back down and we'll. So we've seen some lovely PowerPoints this morning. So I thought, how can I be a special cause? So I'm not going to give you a PowerPoint of any kind. So, so this is my whole presentation. Can everybody see that? So it's okay. But tell me characteristic. And I said, good afternoon. You told me some characteristics. It was pretty easy for us to improve when we understand the characteristics of, what it is we're trying to improve. What would be a characteristic of a Deming school? Somebody tell me something. So we'd have a lot of collaboration instead of competition. We'd have a stated purpose. Learning in context. Oh, I like that. Be meaningful. Teachers as facilitators instead of boss management. Interdisciplinary. Continual feedback. Joy of learning. Shared learning between teachers and students. You mean teachers have something to learn? Wow. Self-direction. Self-improvement. Say it again. Systems thinking. Say again. Experiential learning, okay. Fun. What are we not going to do? Tests. Grade levels. We're not going to participate? No, we are going to have participation. Don't need. I tell teachers all the time, sometimes you have to forget your principles and do the right thing. So, what else? Anything else? Pretty cool. So where in the world is this happening? Yeah. There are pockets, and I can point to pockets around the world, a school district or a school or even just an individual classroom. Deming often said change has to start from the top. So after my first 4-day seminar, I came back with a list like this too. And I looked at my system and thought, we're not doing any of those things, or we're doing a lot of those things we shouldn't be doing. And what are we going to do about that, And so I came back to my system and started telling my superintendent and my principal what a bad job they were doing. And, because they're the top, right? And change has to start from the top. And they didn't get very excited about all this new thinking. And finally, after about 6 months of that, putting articles in their boxes and things like that, nothing happening. I thought, this is just not going to work. But then I walked back into the classroom and looked at this group of 30 students, and I thought, I must be the top of something around here. And I actually said to my students, if we can't figure out a different way to collaborate, to participate, to get along, to be able to work to high quality standards on things, and we have no business complaining about the administrators running the school, because we don't even have a cycle of that, see? And that began my journey about, how to make things happen, okay? So I want to take on this thing about grades, because we heard a lot about grades, eliminating grades, and what would we do in a system without grades and things like that. But it's all around us, isn't it? Lots of people this morning were talking about from birth on, and Deming was very clear about that. From birth on, we're being manipulated by these things. My kids, I have 5 kids. We tried not to raise our kids with extrinsic motivators and things like that. And my wife and I were going out to dinner one time, and we hired a babysitter from the university that was in the education department, and left her with the 2 youngest kids, and my young daughter was about 5, and my little son was about 2.5 or 3. And anyway, we came back, and the babysitter met us at the door, and the first thing she said is, she said, "What do you guys do?" And so we started telling him a little bit, and I said, "What, did something happen tonight? Did they torture you or something?" Or... She said, "Well, something happened tonight, and I didn't know what to do." I said, "Well, what happened?" She said, "Well, you know, your 2.5-year-old son, he was kind of being fussy and doing stuff." And I told him, I said, "Look, if you stop being fussy, I'll give you a sucker." And right away, your 5-year-old daughter said, "We don't do that around here." This girl from the education department, she said, "You don't do what around here? You don't allow sugar?" You see, there was no concept in her mind about what the 5-year-old was talking about. But Deming was very clear that profound knowledge is not limited to age. You can have 5-year-olds that have amazing, profound knowledge at looking at a situation where you have 50-year-olds that cannot think differently about that. But at 5 years old, she knew that we don't bribe people to do things. And I said, "Well, did you ask her, you know, what do you do around here?" She said, "Yeah, he should do the right thing because it's the right thing to do." Oh, that's a novel idea, isn't it? And, you know, what if he doesn't do the right thing? Well, he's going to get some feedback. And we're going to have a chat about that. I'm going to talk about that a little bit. So it was the same way with Deming. When I started asking him, I said, "Well, how did you grade people?" Because he said, "I didn't ever grade people at the university." I said, "What'd you do?" He said, "Well, I'd write comments on papers. You know, like this, don't like that. I think we need to have a little chat about this. I think maybe you need to rework this whole thing." And so I started taking that concept and starting to think about, wow, could you transform a system thinking like that? Now, most of us encounter these kinds of systems. I was at a university doing a presentation, and my students were all working, so I walked down the hallway, was looking on the bulletin board, and they just posted the grades for the abnormal psychology class. And I started looking at that, and I thought, yep, you can't get more abnormal than that. If you really wanted to inflict a defective process on people, this is it. Only have 4 tests, or 3 tests, 4 tests and a final. Somehow it's 1, 2, 4, 3. 4 tests and a final, and then you rank everybody based on those 4 tests. And that determines their future. So I started taking on this grading thing, starting to think about, okay, well, we were deep into it. We had GPAs. I was teaching at a high school. We had GPAs, and everything was tied. In fact, the year before I went to see Dr. Deming, I had just taught the entire staff how to grade their students to 1/1000th of a point using spreadsheets. We had very sophisticated spreadsheets, so you could grade your kids to 1/1000th of the point. And we spent a lot of time learning how to do that, how to get really good at that. And then Deming comes along and says, "No, get rid of it." And my staff didn't like it when I came back and said, "Okay, we're going to throw all that out." And what did it actually get us? Well, the whole reason we did that is because we had too many valedictorians. See, the number of valedictorians was increasing, and so the artificial scarcity was getting out of whack, and so we got to artificially stratify the data so we have fewer valedictorians. Interesting what we do, and Deming's saying, look, if you set up a cooperative system, you know, let's say you have 300 kids graduating, you could have 295 valedictorians. In fact, that's really what you should be working for, right? Not just sublevels of poor quality. And that's all a grading system does, is you just simply set up standards for sublevels of poor quality. Say, would you like to go, buy a new car? And then the guy says to you, would you like an A car or a B car or C car? And we got these D cars over here. They're even $30,000 less, but there's real reasons because they're full of defects. No, we wouldn't do that. In fact, most of our systems around the world, we demand very high quality in everything that we do. It's really interesting traveling around the world. In the US, when you turn your phone on, you expect to get a dial tone or hear that tone, right? When I went to Argentina, that's a novelty. It's not, and they're just used to dysfunctional systems at a high level. It's not always there. See? So we do require high levels of performance. So how does that work in a classroom? What do we begin to think about how that might be? So Deming talked a lot about intrinsic motivation, right? He was also very into brain research before he died. He loved hearing all the speakers that were, at the time, brain research was really starting to come out, neuroscience, and how do we interpret that, and Deming was really into that. I think if he had more time, we might have had a fifth element of profound knowledge, which was brain research, the actual neuroscience of how people think, and are we creating systems allowing that to happen? Well, Deming talked a lot about intrinsic motivation, so I thought I'd introduce you to J.W. Wilson. He's going to be at our Deming and Education Conference in November. And he's talking about his research on intrinsic motivation.
So basically everybody watching this video, the reason that they have the clothes that they have on, the reason they had for breakfast what they had for breakfast, and the reason they had for dinner what they had for dinner last night is because existing neurological structures dictate those behaviors. So all of your behaviors in our world, in the biological world, all of your behaviors are dictated by your existing neurological structures. The only way you can change somebody's behavior is to change the structure. So all of our behavioral management programs, most of them really, aren't looking at the biological ways to change our structures so our behaviors change. The more that we are able to look at how we change the internal biology of the person that you want to shift their behavior, the more effective we can be at building programs that do that. So, and you kind of alluded to reward and punishment. What we have done is we've gone back to what's called behaviorism, which is within the 1950s. A guy named Watson and Skinner were famous for kind of developing that. And what they purported, and it really came from Newtonian physics, was the more force you applied to someone, the more productivity you could get out of them. So the idea that intrinsic rewards, external rewards, could drive an organism, or whether it's a rat, a mouse, or a man, could drive an organism to perform at higher levels. The idea was that the higher the reward, the higher the punishment, the more you could get an organism to conform and behave in certain ways. But as the research went forward, really in the 1980s, really, a guy, DC, who I believe at the University of Rochester, who was just did incredible research, he basically debunked the myth that reward and punishment causes productivity. What he found was, and since then numerous researchers have found this, and Daniel, I think it's David Pink or Daniel Pink, I just saw him on a video, and he was talking about basically the same thing, that corporate America believes that extrinsic motivation, reward and punishment, causes productivity. But everybody in the motivation world knows it isn't true. Everybody in the science world knows it isn't true. It's kind of this mismatch. Really, the educational system hasn't caught up yet either. What we have is when you use external rewards and punishment, basically you disengage the neurological structures for learning. So really, the higher the reward and punishment, the lower the learning. Not only the lower the learning, the lower the creativity, the lower the productivity, the lower the innovation, the lower the connectedness to your fellow man. What happens is the higher the reward and punishment, the more your peripheral vision in every arena limits. So if your goal is to get an A, I don't care about what I learned. I care about getting the A. So, I drink a lot of coffee, I stay up all night. What I remember is all the mechanisms I used to get the A, not the information that allowed me to get the A. So really, reward and punishment is a dramatically ineffective way to create learning. Yet it's what we use, our whole system is based upon it. Conversely, the question is, what is the answer? If it's not reward and punishment, what do you do? Well, the answer is a thing called the meaning network. In every one of us, there's a group of structures that help us select in information into our brain structures that's meaningful. The more meaningful the information, think of your own life, the things that are meaningful to you. You don't really have to memorize. That information just selects right into your brain. I can read information on dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, different, chemicals, and it selects right in. I don't have to memorize anything because it's highly meaningful to it, and I can use it in my life. Same thing with people that, ride horses or learn how to fly fish, play golf. They're not memorizing how to hit the golf club. What they're doing is saying, oh, I ought to try this. It selects right in. So what happens in our educational system that we don't do is we don't ask the child, what is meaningful to you, so that they can access their meaning network and then wrap the information we want them to learn in that meaning. When that happens, when the children understand, and adults, when they understand that what they are, the direction they're going in is intrinsically satisfying, the ability of the brain to select in information increases 1, 2, 3, 4, 500%. And the ability that you have to use to try to control their behavior drops away. They already control their own behavior because it's intrinsically directed.
Get rid of that. There you go. So this is the same research that I started running into starting around late 1980s, and taking a look at how brains actually operate, and started thinking about how to do this. So we learned this morning doing a PDSA cycle in a small environment as a trial is a really good thing, right? So I went back to look at my system and said, okay, where can I start? And I had about 7 kids, much like the students that are here, in an AP exam level class on artificial intelligence that I was teaching. I thought, well, I'll just start with these 7 kids because I really can't screw them up anyway. They're all going to, regardless of what I do, they're going to go on and be great. And so I just came in and I said, we talked a little bit about this whole grade thing, and I said, I think all of you are going to get A's, so I'm just going to give you all A's now. Regardless of what we do or how we perform, you're just all going to get an A. And they didn't believe me, they didn't trust me, and they made me get my book out and actually write them down. And then we did that, and I said, now why are we here? What's the meaning? Why would you come back tomorrow? One kid said, to see if you're crazier tomorrow than you were today. Okay, well, that's some level of meaning. But even with those year 12 senior kids, that very bright people, all going on to major universities, Yale, Harvard, you name it, they had places picked out that they were going to go. It took us about 10 days of having these discussions and debates about why would we be here if we didn't get a grade. See, and Deming was right. How deep is this in our psyche that we believe this behaviorist stuff? Deming often said economists have sold us down the river. Well, behaviorists have sold educators down the river for years. On a theory, a failed theory, it doesn't work, and the answer always do more of that. Because it didn't work the first time, so maybe we double the incentive, we can do that. So let's have pay for grades, and let's do, every study always shows it doesn't work, but we keep doing it because we're just so addicted to it. So what do you start to do instead? And I kept my grades on the side of these 7 kids for a semester, because even we did same stuff we always did, same assignments, same projects, same stuff. And you know what I found out? Nothing. My theory was, oh, I'll get so much better results because we don't have to worry about the grades and we're just worried about the learning. I got the same results, which was kind of that I'd always gotten in previous years. And then it took me a while to think about, well, what's going on here? And then I finally realized, well, if it's really not having any effect on the learning to begin with, why are we doing it? Why are we spending all that time, money, and effort to do something that's not going to have any effect on performance? The performance is already built into the system. Where these kids came from, their background, previous upstream schools that they were at, their parents, those are all things that are part of the system itself. So we started studying the system itself and started to use Deming's diagram that you saw this morning on systems thinking and apply that to education. So we get something looks sort of like that. You think of a K through 12 system. So you have the inputs on this side, places where people are learning before they come in. So as soon as we started doing this, and I'm doing this with students, not the faculty, we're having these discussions going through these things. As soon as we started doing this, we started thinking about what's the product of education? What are we actually trying to produce? And so we had big discussions about it. You know, well, it's the students, and some kids said, no, it's the parents. And we started thinking, well, what is the product that we're trying to produce? And finally, it came down to learning itself. That we are all creating a product of learning, a very high level of learning, and we're all to work together to make that product the highest it can possibly be. So students are not customers, or they're not products. They're not inanimate things that we do like in manufacturing to make it better. They actually are willing workers in the system working on the product of learning. And if we can have their input, their feedback, their ideas about how to make it better and what to do about it, we can have an amazing product that then it's going to go out and affect society. Okay? And we think about, well, you know, we got SAT tests and all kinds of stuff and going on, and we think of those as measures of performance of the system. But the system is not, we're not designing people just to become good test takers. We're designing them to go out into society and make a difference, right? So we really would want to find out, is the learning that they're gaining in this institution really making a difference for those people once they get out? So we want to be, and Deming said, we need to know 15, 20 years out, is it making a difference in people's lives? So that caused us to start think about taking longitudinal studies and looking way out as far as we could to find out, you know, is what we're doing making a difference for these kids when they hit society? Are they getting jobs and holding jobs? Are they going on to universities? Are they having fun in society? You know, what are they doing? And we did massive studies on that. And over an 11-year period, we found out that we measured 24 to 27-year-olds because we figured they're either out of a university or they're out of a job program or they're in a job if they want it. And the average unemployment rate in the state of Alaska, where I was, in that range is something like 40-some% of kids are unemployed in that range. But of all the students that we looked coming through our high school, less than 5% were ever unemployed in the same age range. So we knew, just looking at that statistic, we are creating people that are able to go out and look at the next system. So when I started doing this training, consulting work, and helping other people, one of the places I ended up was down in Leander, Texas, and they were just a tiny little school district of 3,000 students when we began working with them. Today, they're a mammoth school district of 35,000 students and growing rapidly. But we started with them the same thing. Think of what you do as a system. And here's their first systems diagram. We heard a lot of the talk this morning about the hierarchy, and they had that too. In fact, when I started working with the superintendent there, I said, what's your method of improvement here? He said, to fire people. And he was very upfront about it. That's my method of improvement. See, and if that's the only method you have, then that's what you're going to use. Don't try to read this, you'll just hurt yourselves. But what I really wanted you to show is you have suppliers or inputs where people learn before they come to the system itself. And then what they were trying to show here is the interaction of the parts to the whole. Systems thinking. What actually goes on with that? Is that one better than this one? And then that's all fulfilling and going on and affecting society, what we do. So when you start to get a whole system begin to think like that, they stop having bosses. They stop thinking about what does my boss want, or the principal want, or what does the superintendent want. Everybody starts thinking about, wow, how can we improve this for the good of students, and the product of learning gets better and better over time. And today, this school district is one of the top performing school districts in the state of Texas, which is saying something, and they have been consistently doing that for 20 years. That's longitudinal thinking. And they're one of the very few places that I go to work with, and I say, let's take a look at your longitudinal data. A lot of times people will say, what? You mean last year's scores and this year's scores? That's all the data they have. But Leander has 20 years of data that they keep track of to see, do we have trends? Do we have special causes? Is this common cause variation? See, what's the appropriate action to take on the system itself? So even in classrooms, we started doing discussions like that. And I thought I'd had it here, but I'll bring it up again. All right, so we learned this morning that operational definitions are very important. So I was going to take on this thing about grading and ranking, and because it's a big part of the system itself, and what do we do about that? And if you think of causes of variability, if you take on big systemic causes like that, it has big potential for impacting the system in major ways. Does that make sense? Okay. We tend to only work on things that are easy to get at, things that are easy to do. We don't want to work on hard things because, it's hard. But if you take on things like that, it also has a big potential for payoff. So you first have to have an operational definition. That's the best one I've ever found for grading. Written by a guy from Michigan State. You guys from Iowa might not want to believe it. So, but also in 1957. So these are not new things. Educators have known this forever, but we just keep on doing it. Keep on doing the same thing, but expecting a different result, and we know that's sanity. Well, let's do it even better. Let's grade to 1/1000th of a point. Let's have computerized programs that keep track of everything. Technology isn't as great. We can see our grades all the time now. Right in front of your face, you bam, 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 bam. Instantly get it up there. Won't that be great? But nobody's stopping to think about, well, should we be doing this at all? Okay. Peter Schultes used to say, people used to ask him, well, if we get rid of performance appraisals, what do we do? There's this big panic about, what do we do about this? And Deming often said that sometimes the best thing to do is nothing. It'd be a whole lot better not to have any performance appraisals than to heap tons of effort on making a better one. But Peter Schultes used to say, if you quit smoking, you don't have to put another lighted stick in your mouth to replace it. You just stop doing it. See? So how does that actually... How can that work in a classroom? So I don't have all the answers. I just have a answer. So we'll come down to here. So I had my abnormal psychology data, in my classrooms. And so I started taking it and calling up people at Boeing, Hewlett-Packard, DuPont, all kinds of people, and I find out, do you have any quality people there? If they said, huh? Well, I hung up. If they said, oh yeah, we have people working, then I'd go and meet with them. And I did that for about 6 months, and I'd show them my grade book, all the scores I had in my marking book, and then they'd ask some questions, and then they'd start laughing hysterically. I said, well, what's the problem? They said, well, you got, test scores, and you got attendance scores, and you got attitude, and you got extra credit points, and you got this, and then you lump these all together, and you predict somebody's future with it. And that's kind of, okay, well, what do we do? You are using that for prediction. You're saying, you can predict somebody's future with that. So what do we do differently? Well, a lot of the advice I got was to go to go, no, go data. You know, is it there? Is the quality of what you want there? Is it not? It's not there. What are you going to do about it? You don't just take poor quality, levels of poor quality, and, you know, this is a B, a C, D, and F kind of thinking. It's either got to be there or not. If it's not there, what do we do about it? It's a systems problem. So this is what I came up with. These are students' names. This is their grade levels. And these are the integrated learning projects that you all were shouting out would be part of a Deming school. And you're moving through these projects, and you have characteristics for each project to know, what's the standard on this project? So it can be everything from, do you have your name on your paper, to, you know, you must explain these things, explain that, explain this. And I just adopted Deming's method. You can see that there are target dates. We changed the terminology because changing the system. It's no longer a due date. These are target dates. And it also made a big shift, and we laid out the entire quarter or entire semester or whole year. These are all the projects, all the things you have to complete. And here's a recommended timeline for staying on that target. So on a particular date, you may or may not finish this project on time and meet that target, but you need to get it in before the end of the time period, because my flexibility ends at the end of a quarter. I can no longer change your grade or do much about that. And the reason we started thinking like that is because the number one factor in variability in performance was time. See, if I give all of you a difficult math problem, I'm sure there's a bunch of you in here who could do it in a matter of minutes. There'd be some of us still struggling by tomorrow. But given enough time and help, we could eventually get it to some level of performance, couldn't we? See? Are we ever going to have the aptitude of somebody that was just born with a preponderance of neurons in that part of their brain? Probably not. Some of us have it, some of us don't have it. But we can improve upon what we have. I saw this in my own 5 kids. My oldest daughter was in 2nd grade, and her younger sister was about 4 or 5. She'd be at the table coloring, the 4 or 5-year-old, and I'd be helping my 2nd grade daughter with her math. And I say, you know, what's 9 plus 9? 18, you know, and I'm giving her these math problems, right? And all of a sudden, the 4-year-old starts answering them. 18, 9, that's 12, 11. And she just keeps coloring. And I just started asking her questions. Intuitively, she just had more neurons in that side of her brain, and she was like that the rest of her life. She always just thought math was easy. She didn't understand what the rest of you are complaining about. So, see? What are we going to do about that? She's in a math class. She's acing it. What are we going to do about that? See? That's what Deming would say. Somebody's better at something, or somebody below average on something. What are you going to do about it? How are you going to change that system? So variability around time is a big issue. See? Why do we get so much variability now? Because we have due dates. This is due Friday. What happens if you don't get it in by Friday, class? Yeah, you're in big trouble, aren't you? You're in deep doo-doo. Don't get in, because that's the due date. And why do we have due dates? Because that's the easiest thing for your professors. See, if I get work trickling in over a period of time, it's a lot more harder for me to get feedback back to you and work on things. And, you know, it's much easier for me just to have a due date here, get it all in, and boom. And it's really easy if you turn in a piece of crap, you know, oh, F, that's easy to grade. And so teachers start to become like Zorro over time. They get really good at marking and finding mistakes, right? I used to time myself 7 seconds on that one. I could do better. And we wonder why students are not finding their own mistakes. They're not inspecting their own work. They're not planning any differently. See? Because the teacher's doing all that stuff. So change the system, you get a different result. So these are due dates. Don't hit this target date. Okay, when are you going to get it in? Is it going to take you an extra day? What? See, it also allows for variability. Anybody in here ever been sick? You know, yeah. Talking to the right people then, right? Did you plan to get sick on the day of the test? Did you plan that ahead of time and have people cough on you just so you could do that? No. Random variation is at work, right? Variability. Does the system allow for random variation? Not much. Got to have a doctor's report because we can't trust you. See? But what if we change the system and we said, okay, can't get it in, when can you get it in? Why do we have cheating? Because we have due dates and we have, you must have it by this date. Anybody here ever take a high-stakes test? Just like Paula this morning, I just want to make sure I'm talking to the right crowd, right? You're my customers, right? Took a high-stakes test. Did you ever take that test and realize you'd been tricked? Or maybe afterwards you got your grade and you realized you'd been tricked. Why would we do that as teachers, put trick questions in tests? We tend to have academic phrases like, to make them think. And no, it's to artificially stratify the data. What happens if you take all the trick questions out of a test? What happens to the scores? They all go, oh, this is a bad thing in schools. Having all kids perform to the highest levels is a horrible thing to have happen. You see, the thinking is so prevailing in teachers' minds about things. And often when I explain these things, teachers tell me all the time, well, what if all the kids got everything to 100%? That'd be a terrible world, wouldn't it? See, we wouldn't have any winners and losers, we just have winners around here. Interesting, different way to think about things. So how are you going to get there? Variability about time was a big factor. So can I account for that? Can I have a system that enables that to happen? And kids get it. You know, I can be flexible from the beginning to the end, but if you run up against this barrier down here, my flexibility ends after that. Then the state takes over or somebody else has to do something. But if you have problems in this, you can't get this quite done or whatever, fix it. Now, kids that turn stuff in, you turn one of these assignments in, I can get it, I give you feedback. Is it relatively close to the standard, required standard? Is it within acceptable limits of variation? See? If it's within acceptable limits of variation around a standard, great. Give them a 1, go on. Anybody can take an assignment, nitpick it to death, and find little itty things wrong with it, right? Itty bitty things wrong with it. Anybody can do something like that. But were they relatively close to this standard, close enough that they should go on? If not, well, we're going to have a chat about that. And you're going to get some feedback. Have you thought about this? I think you need to rework this paragraph. I didn't think you explained this concept very well. Let's go over that again. Go back and rework that, then I think you'll have your 1. And we sort of happened into this one thing, and it had a lot of metaphors to it. The kids would say, oh, that's an easy 1. Did you get that one? I like that one. And there's just a lot of 1s in that. And it just happened because I was using spreadsheets, and the computer could calculate 1s really easy, so we just started using that, but then it stuck as a really good way to think about things. So their job was to try to get all 1s across here for the entire quarter. Now, nothing's stopping you. Well, you know, I didn't have time to study last night. Okay, so you're going to be a little late around this target date, but when can you get it in? Then my job is to monitor how they're doing around, if I have a target date, what's the variability around that target date? Are they all within a reasonable time frame? You students know you don't ever hand something in early, right? Why? You never get it done early, that's one reason, but what would happen to your paper if you handed it in early? Yeah, it gets extra attention, gets more scrutiny. We don't want that, right? So you only hand it in on target day because you know there's going to be mass papers coming in. They'll never have time to look at it. And I used to play games with my professors, you know, about page 25, I'd write a line that says, if you read this far, call me up because I don't think you've read this. Never got called up. So, but if you're in a system where, hey, if you want to work ahead, see, you said, The Deming school would be self-paced environment. People can move as fast as they want to go. If you want to move ahead and you're well motivated to keep moving ahead, go for it. Don't let me stop you. Amazing stuff started to happen. Within 3-4 weeks, we've got kids that are 6-7 weeks ahead. That's motivating. That's intrinsically, it has meaning for them. They want to move fast. They want to get this done. And we had teachers starting to say things, oh my God, these kids are finishing stuff 4 weeks early. This is a bad thing in school. See, now you're really starting to see what the system is capable of. If you get all the, Deming is right, 98, 99% of the reasons are coming from management itself. And we were management. We were causing the dysfunction, okay? Typically in any grading system, only about 5 to 10% of the population gets an A. Only about 5 to 10% of the population are motivated by grades because they're getting A's. That means 90% see it as a demotivator, a demotivating process. So can you maintain a process so you just have 5 to 10% of the people feeling motivated? Or is your job to motivate 100% of the people and come up with a new system, a new way to operate? That make sense? No? You said I had my full hour, right? So let me just show you some data here. There's still ways to think about things. Like, here's the number of assignments that in a particular period of time that have been in. And you can see some kids are as many as 15 assignments in, completed as standard. I got this kid down here with 6. We'll call him Mikey. But if you do it Deming's way and you put this on a control chart, and this, in this instance, there was no more than 15 assignments, so that was the top. That's the best you could do. The low end comes clear down here, 1.5 or 2 or something. I don't have any special cause kids. All I've got is common cause variation here. And the interesting thing is, I took everybody's names off. If you're a teacher, how many of your teachers in here, college or not, or what? Yeah, if you're a teacher, you really want to understand this Deming stuff, take all the names off your test results, take all the names off your data. Still get the data, take all the names off. You can no longer do the dysfunctional behaviorist things we've been taught to do. So I see there's a kid here at 6, but I can't do anything because I really don't know who that is. I suspect it's Mikey, but I don't know for sure who that is. So what's the best thing I can do to help him? Change the system. Okay? And when I change the system in a different way, it's not only going to help that person, it's probably going to help a whole bunch of other people that have varying degrees of variation going on. And pretty soon you're able to start to look at the system much differently. And the only way to change it is to go back and ask the students, what's the problem? The first time I started getting feedback from students, didn't like it. I didn't like it at all. You go too fast, I can't understand your accent. I couldn't remember what I was supposed to do. The assignments weren't clear. I told you that. See, you want to shoot the messengers. But when you really start thinking about what it is they're telling you, what's wrong with what's going on, and you start actually making changes on that, all of a sudden all performance starts to go up because there are common causes of variation at work. But generally, teachers can't see them themselves because they're in the system, and you need that outside intervention. So I just wanted to share with you, I told you I met Dr. Deming in 1986. This is what happened in required classes for graduation. You're looking at A's, B's, C's, D's, and F's. Okay? And then my class is about 10% of the kids would traditionally get A's, and I'd have, 30 or 40% of the kids that would fail. And that was pretty common with all the other teachers in our building. But we thought we were a really tough school. Now I know we were just really stupid at the time, that any moron can come up with a grading scale to make 90% of the people look like failures. It doesn't take any brains at all to do that. It takes a lot of brains to make 100% of the people achieve high levels of performance. Ooh, that's hard to do. This is also the time when I started just introducing Deming concepts to students. We started changing how we cooperated, how we worked together, just talking about stuff, and using some tools, getting some data, getting kids to think about things. You can see how the data changes. This is still in a grading system. I couldn't just stop doing it, even though I wanted to. By the time we got here, by the third year, I went to my principal and I said, is there any state law that says that all of my students cannot get A's? And he laughed at me. Well, no, there's no state law that they can't all get A's. And so the next year, jumped almost 60% of the kids were getting A's in the required classes. And guess, when I turned in my grades, guess who was in my room in 5 minutes? Principal, what are you doing, Langford? You can't be doing that. And we had massive discussions, knockdown, drag-out meetings, because the system wants to pull you back. Nobody wants you breaking out of the system. Whether you're a student, teacher, whatever it is, they don't want you breaking out of the system. So at that moment of truth, what are you going to do? Okay. How do you keep your job? How do you still move forward with your principles? Okay. The Deming points, or you just let the system suck you back in and say, oh, great, fine, grade me, rank me. So we made a shift here because up until that point, your grade was being determined by the number of ones that you got. So if we had 10 assignments and you got 9 of them into standard by the end of the quarter, you got a 90. And then the state said that's a B. The students said, let's just go to A or incomplete, and look what happened. So Oodle's research on intrinsic motivation says that people are motivated by mastery. When you master something, that's very motivating. That's why people play musical instruments, and they're not getting graded for that. Why do they do that? Because they like to master that concept or that idea on their own time. So when we move to a mastery thing, it's either you're hitting this very high standard or it's not yet. If it's not yet, and you can see what happened, still we had less than 5% of the kids were not meeting that standard. And when we investigated all these special causes, every one of them had nothing to do with ability, had special circumstances going on. My mother died. I was sick, had the flu. Every one of them said, I'll just come back and take the class again. And when they did, they got an A. So if you got all ones across, you got an A. And that became the only option, either high performance or not yet. You just need more help and time to get there. And a massive transformation in motivation happening. I was no longer the taskmaster. I could work with them. They had the whole plan for the quarter. So basically, I'd come in every day and just say, hey, what are you working on today? What's happening? Do you need any help? And eliminated all barriers between helping people. Back in this world back here, if you're an A student, can you help a B student get better? Not if it's graded on a curve. You better not. You're a fool. See? And so when we got rid of that, if you're an A student up here, well, can you help somebody else? Sure. Not going to hurt you a bit. You can share information. You can cooperate with people. Also, cheating went down to 0 because there's no reason to cheat because we're not playing a game. So what happens if you take a test and you don't do well? Oh, well, you're going to get some feedback. We're going to go back over your test. We're going to help you see what you did wrong. We're going to have to go back and relearn that. And then you can come back and take the test again. If you get a score with an acceptable level of variation, great, move on. See, it's all about learning, or people learning. So those of you that were ever in Deming's trainings, Deming always started off by saying we're here for 3 reasons. What are they? To learn, to have fun, make a difference. So in education, are you making a difference in people's lives? Are you changing their lives? Making a difference there? Or are you just perpetuating the same old system? I can't tell you in this world how many people came into my room with tears in their eyes saying, this is the first A I've ever gotten in my whole life. Had nothing to do with ability, but studies have been done. Kids know by 2nd grade who the valedictorians are going to be. They can predict that because of this system. You change the system, you get a whole different world. So maybe a question or? Yes?
David, you mentioned that some of the students could move ahead real fast. And I can imagine teachers saying, oh my God, they're at 6 or 7 and they're barely even started. So what would happen with those students as they move further?
So you get choices. Hard work gets you choices. It's not couched in ability. Here's somebody who's working really hard, right? They're going to get all kinds of choices. So what are some of your choices? you could help other people. You're so far ahead that if you spend a whole week helping her, and you'd probably like to help her, wouldn't you? So, yeah. Yeah, it worked. So you could spend a whole week helping her and having a, improving your relationship with her and everything else. And not going to hurt you a bit. Yeah, you have a choice to do nothing, but people just don't choose to do nothing. Okay? You could work on something else. Maybe you got a history project that's really bugging you and you're not able, how about taking this time and working on that to get that to the level that you need to get it to too. So we started seeing improvement go up in all areas. You got this huge novel you're writing in English, but you're 6 assignments ahead in math. Take 6 weeks and focus in on that. Kids started making responsible decisions in managing their own learning. Because didn't you say Deming School should be self-managed? What else? Anything else? We'll probably have... Yes? Yeah. It was just crazy Langford to begin with. And so they could couch that away as, oh yeah, he's just doing that stuff again. But then when we got to this point and we started having masses of kids starting to do better, then that's when the rubber met the road. We had really knockdown, drag-out meetings as a staff right here. In fact, we had people stand up and say, it's my right to judge these people. Seriously. It's my right to predict what... And people say stuff like, well, who's going to clean our bathrooms at the motels? Seriously, this goes on in high schools all the time, this level of thinking. Well, if we had highly educated people taking those jobs, we might have a whole different cleanliness level happening in the bathrooms. And I found out in my lifetime, there's people that love this kind of stuff. There's people that love cooking. I do it, but I don't love it, right? We have the lady comes and cleans our house. I talked to her, she said, I just love cleaning houses. The dirtier, the better. Wow. See? We need all these people, the diversity of the species. That's what makes us so strong, see? So you can have a highly educated house cleaner. We don't have to have people that are poorly educated. So this was the moment of truth when there was more people on my side than theirs. But that took 4 years to get to that point, and people said, why can't we all do this? And then that made the shift. But we did have to wait for some people to die. So. All right, thank you very much.